Not absolutely. If you could think about the history of the house, which we haven't talked about, this room represents one of the few surviving parts of the 18th century house, which went through to Ormerod's time, and therefore would have been here in when he was here. He must have done his work somewhere here, and I think what he actually did, if you read what he says in his own book, he came to Chester in the spring and summer of each year, 1811 to 1817, and he would go out from here every day, probably on horseback, he doesn't say that, but it must have been so, and go to one of the many townships in Cheshire, and he would record that what he saw, he would make drawings, he would speak to the landowners, and then he'd come home in the evening, and he would have come to this room, I think, and deposited his scroll from his saddlebag into a cabinet. Now, if we'd found a cabinet, that would tell us whether likely that this room was anything to do with it. Well, of course, I did discover that. We were down in Reading, in the south of England, a chap called Walter Ormerod. I went to see him, and he said, "Come and look at this piece of furniture I've got in the back of my house, John." So I did, and there was this wonderful, can only be described as a cabinet. It's an enormous piece of wooden furniture, but it was marked up with the 600s of Cheshire. And that meant to say it was his filing cabinet. And I measured it up, and I came back, and sure enough, it fits exactly on the wall, which you won't be able to see exactly, but from the doorway on the south side, right through to the wall opposite, exactly. And I think it was on that wall. So what I think he did was to come back at the end of his day's outings and put his scroll into one of those holes in the piece of equipment, in the piece of cabinet, and off he would go and have dinner, and go out the next day. We know that he worked in that manner. He visited no less than 509 townships in Cheshire, which there are. I think all of West Cheshire from here, East Cheshire, probably all from Sandbach, where his in-laws lived. And most of with a few exceptions, everything was done from those two places, but on the basis of day trips. Now, as well as that, of course, he was writing to all the landowners, and he was visiting Chester Castle in the company with people who were helping him to look at documents. So he had all those things to do while he was up here. But if we ask the question, did he write the history here? I think the answer must be no, because in the winter and autumn and winter, he could go back to London, where he rented a house, and worked from the British Museum mainly. And I think he actually did his writing down there, whilst he had some time, because he was very busy up here. There is, of course, the additional factors that he was going to church here, he was a magistrate, a certain amount of social life, therefore he wasn't 100% occupied with the history. And of course, his wife had 3 children while they were here, so he was busy with that as well.